It is Monday, June 12th at 4:45, and I'm calling this HR Committee meeting to order with a quorum present in the chamber. Number one is the approval of the May 8th, 2023 minutes. They're in your packet. Any questions or concerns? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept. Motion by Herbst, second by Killian. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Human Resources Report for May 2023 is in the packet. Any questions? No? Okay. Then we will put that on file. Discussion of possible action amending Employee Handbook Section 8.06, use of sick leave.
This, I think this is kind of close to my heart because I know that, I know it sounds weird, but I know that a lot of either whether they be single parents or just working mothers have a lot of challenges. And it was brought to my attention that in the past, someone would have like a sick child and they would call in to work and they would be told, well, you have to use your vacation. You can't use your sick leave for that. Or I need to take my spouse to the doctor. Well, that's not what sick leave, So I wanted to clarify in the policy or in the employee handbook, because I think that it was kind of what it meant, but it didn't just come out and say that. So I wanted to go ahead and just kind of flesh that out so that people wouldn't have to worry about, well, my boss feels this way or human resources feels this way. I wanted to spell that out so they could feel good about knowing that, if something happens in an emergency situation, they can take their spouse to the doctor or they can take care of their sick child and not have to have that extra worry about how they're going to cover that with their time off.
I have a suggestion, so I'm not sure how you want to, because I would think that the wording sick leave for transport, I think that we really want to do more than just give permission to use sick leave on coming and going. Wouldn't a better word there to being accompanied so that accompany an immediate family member so that that person could not only transport or from the beginning stay with that family member throughout the whole appointment. I would think that it's more than just transporting, but I think it's accompanying. You use that word accompanying in your staff report, and I think that's a better word using than just the word transport, because I think we want to speak more than just going back and forth, but we really want to accompany the sick person during the whole appointment process.
Okay. That's fine with me.
Because I think that would expand because with transport, I think you're just sort of saying you're bringing, you're transporting, but I think we wanted to include the whole visitation, which includes picking up at the doctor's office or at the clinic and then taking the person back home. I think it's the whole accompanying that we want to say. That's just my view on it.
Okay.
So do we need to amend, or can you just change that wording to accompany on visit or on appointment?
Because do you see what I'm trying to get at
Right.
in your highlighted on use of sick leave, your highlighted area? I would think that we
Right.
want to include more than just the transport, but indeed the whole accompanying process.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with me. It's just the semantics on how we get that done. I can either bring this again next month, or if we can just change the wording,
I think if
that's
you're
fine.
fine with it now, I'll make that,
Yeah.
and that correction, I'll make that motion. I don't think I have, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do we have, everybody understand what he just changed transport to accompany? Do we have a second? Okay, second by Killian. Any further comments on this change in policy? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Now we're up to discussion and possible action creating communications officer position. I've had requests for a couple of public comments, so Ms. Leonard, I guess you're first.
I didn't know how long that discussion was going to take place. Sometimes they get very lengthy when you're talking HR issues. So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to talk to the HR committee, and good afternoon. My name is Joanne Leonard. I live at 923 Maple Hill Road, Wausau. My husband and I have been residents of Wausau for 54 years. We've watched the good, bad, and the ugly in this city while taxes continue to increase. Right now, the city of Wausau is near capacity, if not over, in its debt limit. And I have a reason. The first part of my introduction is going to relate to the HR position, because I'm concerned about the costs of adding additional positions when the current position of the city is not in the best light. Right now, the city of Wausau is near capacity, if not over, in its debt limit, adding up $70 million in general obligation bonds, $90 million in not clean water fund loans, plus the $45 million safe drinking water fund loan equals $405 million of debt that needs to be paid. This puts the city at $205 million, $20 million over what is, I kind of read through some of the issues related to how they determine what the debt limit is, puts the city about $20 million over its constitutional limit. That's we, the taxpayers, will be accountable for. According to the Wisconsin Department of Administration, these are loans and obligated for payment, all from the property tax. That's you and I if you own property in the city of Wausau, which I assume all of you do. The water utility costs will practically break people with limited means. If things don't change in Wausau with some of these expenses, eventually we will be like a big city in decay from within. And I'm here to talk about this communication officer position, and my first comments relate to the cost of adding one more position in this city. The communications director position should be the role of the mayor or administrator. Lance, for example, I was on the county board for 10 years, and Lance Leonard, and prior to that, Brad Carger, the administrator, and the county board chair, at that time Keith Longenhan, and then Chairman Gribbs, shared the roles of communications. If the mayor does not have all the information he or she needs, he or she can confer the responsibility to director of the department after consultation. That's how both Mr. Leonard and Mr. Gibbs work in the county. I don't believe the mayor's role is being day in and day out in the nitty-gritty of the operations of the city. One of the biggest roles is overseeing the budget, and that has been a dismal failure. There is not a local municipality with special communications director officer positions that is being paid by for the taxpayer. The taxpayer in this city is the last person to be considered in any of the decisions regarding many of the items in the runaway budgets we have. It is time to become more serious about budgeting city needs and consider who is going to pay the bill. I totally oppose hiring a communications officer. I've talked to many people in the city, including in my district, and I urge this HR committee to stand up, be strong for the city of Wausau taxpayers. They've been left in the dark for many years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Alder Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Lou Larson. I reside at 904 South 21st Place, and I'm also the alderperson for District 10. I too am I'm not for the communications person. However, I think at this time, instead of talking about a communications officer, we should be actually looking at an administrator or city manager instead, as to what this lady had said prior to me about the city debt and stuff. I look at the past administrations before I was on board here. And the first thing the couple things that come to mind is the $2.7 million that got thrown away because of mismanagement that the taxpayers had to pay because of the France debacle. The debt went from 55 million to 104 million in 4 years. And I can go on and on. And in today's world, I see department heads going rogue. I see lobbyists allowed to come in and influence our city employees. That who then come and influence us or try to influence us, and therefore many people might be outspoken for. About hiring another position, but I honestly think that if we be looking at a city administrator now instead of a communications operator, if we're going to go, say 1/2 of the mile, we might as well go the full mile with the expense and get one person that does all. And I honestly think, as what one person had wrote in the newspaper, I think from what I had just discussed, I think by hiring a city administrator, we could actually save money by not having these $2.47 million debacles. We could save money by having somebody just look at our budgets and stuff. And therefore, when this comes to council, I will not be for a communications officer, but I will fully support a city administrator / city, I forget the name, but city administrator. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to start, James, now with the conversation of what you had in the packet on this position?
Well, I think really I was just kind of caught off guard because I've worked in municipalities that have had communications managers, communications directors, whatever the verbiage that you want to use. Many times you won't say director because you won't say it's a full department. And I think one of the things that I heard is that people were afraid that it would be sort of a lobbying or whatever for the mayor. And that, I've just never heard of that. I think, to me, a communications manager is making sure that one voice goes to the community. I think just like even though this happened before I got here, that PFAS issue. Someone mentioned earlier about directors going rogue. We don't need directors going on, doing things. All the communication would be funneled through that one person, and that's kind of my thinking on it. But I'll let the mayor speak to what her vision for this proposed position would be.
Do you want me? Thank you. Thank you so much. So interestingly, the county has an administrator, a deputy administrator, and a communications person. So we do have this. One of the reasons we brought it forward now, we started working on this job description before James got here. We worked with Ann on it. We worked with some folks in community development because we were having a lot of outreach from media to individual department heads. You probably all get outreach from media as well. And one of the problems is we don't know who's responding to what. And so we tried to kind of corral that. We have a media inbox now, but it hasn't really changed how that process is going. So, it will be a better response to the media, but I think also better response to the community. We have a newsletter that we do every year, or every quarter. So this person would be responsible for that. We have a variety. PFAS is a perfect example because we did hire outside media consulting for that. And, that ended up being a couple, tens of thousands of dollars to make sure that we were messaging in a way that people understood and could get their questions answered. And also, all of the kind of different ways people understand information. It's not just press releases, right? It's also responding in visual things. It's responding in videos. So this is just a way for us to make sure that we're messaging better. I think you got got an email from Michelle, because I was copied in on it, who works in our customer service area. And she mentioned that it would be nice to have one voice even internally. Sometimes those road closures, right? They find out about it on social media when someone's complaining. So I think there's a lot of directions this could go. I frankly don't really care how you determine who this position reports to. I'm looking for information for the public, for the staff, and being able to also, you got a couple people here that probably want to chat who speak internally too. But we have a new website that we're getting ready to launch, and right now the county's communication person has taken, the lead on that for their work, and we have Jean in my office and Mindy at the fire department taking the lead. So we are going to need somebody to take the lead on that, and it'll mean that other things are reprioritized, but that's part of it. So if you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll be here listening.
Okay, committee? Thoughts, questions? Go ahead, Mike.
I guess I'll start things off.
you.
I think on its face, the position of a communications officer is a good thing. It's something I know that the city has talked about for quite some time. I've been on the council since 2018, and I know the previous administration, this was one of their ideas too. One of their goals was to get somebody to be able to handle a lot of those communication matters that come through, either to the mayor's office or to the individual departments, and just to be able to corral all that stuff and to get a consistent message out, which is actually very important. And there are a lot of different, if you look at what's happening in the city when it comes to communication, there's a lot of different things that are going out. We've got individual departments that are maintaining social presences. We've got, like I said, a new website. We have a videographer that works out through the police department. We've got public access, and I think we do need to consider some type of consistency overall, just point of contact with all of these different elements, so that things coming either from the top down or spread out horizontally stay within what we want to see as a message, either as a message or a city, but also that what we're putting out meets those particular needs and standards that we need for effective communication. And with that, one thing that I see really missing in here, in either essential duties and responsibilities or as knowledge, skills, and abilities, and I see there's nothing in here that is addressing crisis communications. And for a municipality, be it any size, crisis communications is very important. And that's probably one of the things that, even if we don't have a communications officer position here in the city, that it's going to be something that will very easily have us as a city fall on our face. The PFAS situation is probably a good example of poor crisis communications, but there can be a lot of things that would be a lot worse than PFAS that could happen, that where the sudden need for effective communications very quickly, very rapidly, and very consistently in a crisis mode would need to be addressed. And I'd like to see some, if we're going to continue moving forward in shaping this position, that's something that I would really like to see addressed. Not necessarily, the crisis communications coming out of, say, like the police or fire department, where you would think that those would initially come out of mainly because of their their training and knowledge of the incident command system, but something that, where a communications officer could fit into that role as a public information officer in the event of some type of crisis situation.
What is the difference between a city administrator and this communication person?
Actually, night and day.
Right.
One has nothing to do with the other. Most of the time, a city
Mr.
administrator.
Henderson, is your mic on, sir?
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, city administrator basically is a term, it's with your form of government, whether you have a city manager or a city administrator. They are basically, the city administrator is the chief administrative officer of the city, whereas city manager is usually the chief executive officer. A communications person has nothing to do with the running of the city. Again, it's a lot about communicating the city's message. Again, like the alder mentioned, crisis control and things like that, but they would have nothing to do with the running of the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've received a good deal of feedback on this matter, both from citizens in my district and also from outside the district. And I think none of that feedback has supported pulling the trigger on this new position, and the concerns have ranged from budgetary apprehensions to the city's priorities to concerns about budget and how they relate to city priorities. So I agree with that citizen feedback on this, and I think right now what we may need as a focus is more on a public policy response rather than more of a public relations response. And I think if the goal is to get facts to the public, and that is indeed the goal, then right now there are some critical low-hanging fruit elements that we could address cost effectively, and likely with current staff that is not being, in my opinion, addressed fully. One of those is on open records requests and the time frame and manner that we address those. Another is in-language communications for our citizens, particularly in geographies and neighborhoods where there's a high linguistic isolation rate. So I can count, there have been multiple times since I've been elected that I have requested, due to the data, materials in Hmong or Spanish or Hmong and Spanish, and essentially my request has been denied or delayed to the point where it was no longer useful. Additionally, we've got a recent example in the park in my district with DHS asking for signage there, and I had requested this, and this is a communications issue, and not only is it a communications issue, it's one that relates to public health, and it has been very difficult getting movement on that. It appears not just for lack of support from certain facets at City Hall or the county as it relates to park, but just kind of lack of organization or focus on how does this get carried out. So just right there are three critical communications elements as examples that I think we could have been handling better, but that we weren't. So I think communication, like any tool, it can be used for very positive civic purposes, transparency, but it can also be used for other purposes as well. And I think we really need to address these public policy issues before we get too deep into public relations, or we could be left with, intentionally or unintentionally, kind of painting a pretty veneer on some poor policy and policy outcomes. And rather than having a specialist that gives the public more transparency, we could end up with kind of a spin doctor type figure. So I think we need to address these long-standing issues with communication that are critical before we really entertain something like this. And it's been brought up before over the years, and not just in this administration, but prior. And Mr. Henderson had brought it up as well with the department rogue type scenario. And I agree, and it's unfortunate. And some of these inaccuracies, if we're going to be so kind as to call some of them inaccuracies rather than perhaps blatant falsehoods in public-facing communications, there is a large existing supervisory oversight component to that currently exists. So, that should be strong, and when possible, it should be swift, and that comes from, in my understanding with a recent conversation I just had, that supervisory oversight comes from the mayor's office. So I would certainly support stronger supervisory oversight to make sure that department heads are indeed serving our people and not their own interests that at times don't even coincide with fact. So if it's about strengthening public policy and the supervisory oversight of department heads, which has been out of control for decades now, I will support that with enthusiasm and zeal, but I will not be supporting this new position. Thank you.
Any further comments? Go ahead.
Is this budget, is this in the 2023 budget, or how are we funding this?
No, at this point, this is just really exploring the position. There's no budget for it right now, so it would be at least 2024 before we even be considered. So no, it hasn't been placed in a budget.
So it's going to be, so this isn't coming in conjunction with the 2024 budget, then how does it come now then, I guess? Why is it?
Yeah, so right now we're starting the CIP process, and so it kind of makes sense for us to also consider this. If this is an idea you folks like, then we'll figure out how to make it work in the budget. But at this point, I mean, that was my thought on it, like just as we're considering additional capital costs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other? I guess, hang on. I guess I just want to say that I too have gotten a ton of response from it must have been an article, or something. I don't know how many people are watching HR agendas, but it's been all negative. And I don't think it's so negative about wanting a communications, but I think that residents see, what does this do for me? This looked at $84,000, a possible up to $84,000, which seemed pretty hefty price for the, for what the experience requirements were. And I had a lot of questions on that. And I just want to publicly state how much anxiety there is from residents right now regarding how they're going to make it day to day. And I haven't felt this since probably, 2016, 2015, when people had that kind of anxiety about their finances. But we are getting there, and the water rates, as was stated today, are really, really talked about in my neighborhood meetings. And we have elderly people calling me wondering how they're going to pay those. And then if we have another tax increase, which we've had, with this next budget. So I think people are looking at this with a perception of, what does this do for me? How does this make my roads better? How does this protect other things. I don't think residents are against everything. I think that they see value in adding firefighters. I think that they have seen value in it's this position, and it may be not fair, but that's the way it is. They're not seeing a value to this position of how that helps their life. How does that help their value of life or their lifespan in the city? Does that affect me? How will that make me better or my living better here? So with that, I think we pull back and start looking at this again. There's been other outcries of, other positions that may be needed to be, talked about. I don't know what the residents want, but it has been negative against this, and I don't know, I don't feel comfortable, going forward until we have vetted this a bit more. And there's a couple more people. You wanted to speak? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Troy Kersey. I'm the IT manager, excuse me, IT manager for applications team for CCITC. I'm here to speak on behalf of CCITC. In 2021, both the city and the county, in cooperative effort with CCIT, decided that both the city and the county websites needed a refresh to bring them up to modern standards, such as being mobile friendly, device service oriented, and the ability to seamlessly connect multiple communication and social media platforms, social media being a much more prevalent method of communication. During the research, we determined that CCITC was no longer able to provide the types of websites the city and the county were looking for versus a larger vendor. So we went out to RFP. We took bids, and we decided that we went with a company called Granicus, and we've been working on new websites for the last, well over the last year. For the last year, as Katie mentioned, two people have been working as additional duties to maintaining the websites. Commendable job by them. But, we had the fire department and administration doing website maintenance, planning, execution. Based upon our experience managing the websites longer term, we believe that having a dedicated person in this role would be a benefit to the Wausau and its citizens. Having centralized oversight of all parts of the website support provides excellence in its content, communications to its citizens via social media, and helps create a cohesive and consistent branding across departments, something that CCITC has worked in concert with both the city and the county over the years. Being that we're no longer going to be doing that role, we feel that there could be this new role could definitely fit in this slot. Additionally, to the content, there's many more things that the websites do that cannot be overlooked. It's the central contact for emergency notifications creation and dissemination that was spoken to a little bit. Departmental security access, making sure that the right people can make the right updates to the website at the right times, and making sure that that's under control so that we don't have actors putting out information that hasn't been approved. Managing and gathering media, recent events to keep the websites up to date and current and relevant to its citizens. Answering questions from departments regarding the site content, and conducting training to the staff as we have turnover from retirements and people leaving other positions. In conclusion, CCITC recognizes the value that this position would bring to the websites. Thank you.
Come on up, Doug.
Thank you. You all know me, Liz Brodick, Development Director. I just wanted to talk about how this potential position impacts our department, and then talk about also how it could positively impact the residents and how it's viewed in economic development across the state and the region. So our department deals with a lot of media inquiries. We receive we're kind of a lightning rod department. Anytime there's a big new development, we get a lot of questions about it. We also know that media outlets tend to go to several different departments and department heads, and coordinating those responses is not always the easiest. We're, constantly in different meetings and just trying to respond in a timely manner. And making sure that we have all of the information, because development does not just exist in our office, it exists in DPW and inspections and things like that. So we would appreciate having a central point of contact that can help kind of pull all of that together. Obviously, the mall last year was and now again, is a huge media response point that we would love some assistance with. Our affordable housing developments that have gone through WIDA tax credits. When we try to explain that stuff in development, it doesn't come across very clear all the time because we are very used to a certain type of jargon and acronyms and things like that. So having someone who can help explain to residents what is actually going on in some of these projects would be incredibly helpful, not just to us as staff, but to the residents themselves. I mean, this stuff is not the easiest to break down and comprehend. And so having some assistance in doing that would be really, really wonderful. I do think that, thinking of the staff perspective, you've heard staff up here today saying that this would be a helpful position. You heard, referenced in Michelle Van Cray's comments to you via email, why this would be helpful for customer service as well. I think that the point about residents is really, really well taken. The what's in it for me and how does this enhance their quality of life. I would say knowing what's going on in your city enhances your quality of life. For instance, knowing what road closures are happening and when and what exactly is going on are things that would be wonderfully communicated through a position that specializes in doing that. As department heads, we are specialized in our areas of expertise. We are not specialized in communication. We do not practice writing press releases. We have not gone to school for media relations or anything like that. So I think that there is a value to be gained for residents across the city having a clear, concise, consistent, cohesive communication consistently. I also think that there is something to be said about good communication shapes what a community looks like. And in terms of the overall success, that is the image that's projected to the rest of the world, is what's communicated about us. One of the benefits that could happen with a communications position is that Wausau becomes more attractive to residents. And what happens then is that we gain a tax base and we are able to then support the residents that we already have here. So I think that there's additional benefit in basically the way that we communicate or showcase ourselves to the rest of the world. So I think that this does ultimately support staff and residents if this position were to be communicated. And as I mentioned, I would talk about best practices throughout the state. I sit on the Wisconsin Economic Development Association board, and at every one of our conferences, we will talk about, projects that are going on and things like that. And it is for a city of our size, it is unusual that we don't have a communications position. A lot of comparable cities and cities that we aspire to be like have communications positions, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So not necessarily causation, but there's certainly correlation there. So I think there are a lot of really good reasons to entertain this. I know that this has been brought before you several times in the past. But this is, especially with 350 apartments 400 apartments in development. When we are looking at gaining 400 new residents, not to mention the several that have already opened, the several hundred that have already opened, I think that this really does it would enhance our welcoming perception as a community to be able to clearly communicate with our new current residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the IT front, I think what we heard is that there may be kind of a more surgical need identified that we could satisfy vis-a-vis the website. So rather than, kind of this macro communications officer, I think we did hear some very realistic needs that perhaps we could take up at a future meeting, not for this type of position, but simply to try to better satisfy the needs that were described to us, which would be, helping with website content. It wouldn't be a press release explaining to our residents why spending tens of millions on luxury development is a good idea. Those are two separate things. I want nothing to do with the latter, but what IT described, those are concrete, realistic needs that I think we can help satisfy. And also, I think historically, and again, not just this administration, but past administration, where there's been some real crises of confidence from the public has been in the realm of economic development, often economic development deals, subsidized deals, what have you. And had it not been for local investigative journalism, not only would the public have probably not learned about certain critical things, but nor would some of their representatives. So I think there's an extra degree of caution given Wausau's history with deals and the lack of transparency that we'd be extra cautious looking at communications in that realm. And I think that's where we get more into the minister of propaganda territory than someone who's helping IT manage the website in an effective way where there can be needed integration throughout the processes. And then lastly, I'll just speak as a longtime resident myself who was born and raised here, likely conceived here, and I hope to expire here someday. It's my hometown, and I love it. Many Wausonians who either were born and raised here, who've spent a lot of time here, they love their city in spite of certain challenges. They come back to their hometown because they love it. And I think for a lot of Wausonians, there's family, there's friends, and there's their hometown. And that is a trinity that's very close to the heart. So, it's not going to need something that takes an ad age campaign to convince Wausonians that this is a great town, because it's a great town. And, I think we heard from a marketing perspective kind of differences in perspective of, cities we aspire to be like. How about we aspire to be like Wausau, because that's who we are. And from a communications and branding perspective, we've seen this bear out in the private sector. So there's a good case study if you look at Cadillac Catera and Volkswagen Phaeton. Now, those were different ends of the spectrum, and what VW did is they built a car that would rival a Bentley. It was phenomenal, but it wasn't a Volkswagen. It wasn't not consistent with their brand. It failed in the marketplace. Why? Because they were not true to their brand. Cadillac did the same with Catera, decided to go on the low end and try to hit that market and audience. That failed equally profoundly because it failed to live up to its brand. So, one, I'd like to hear less about we're trying to be like another city than being proud of the city we live in. And part of that is communication. So that's something else I think we can improve on from a communications perspective without spending extra money or taking on additional staff. Thank you.
Okay, do you want?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Doug Denny, 708 Fulton. I'm also the alder for District 4. Some good arguments tonight for and against this. And I think, Madam Chair, the common thread that I've seen here quite a bit of is the budget. It's as presented, requires a budget modification mid-budget season. So, that implies a certain sense of urgency, which I don't think we've heard here yet, why it's urgent to pick this up right now. And I would suggest that we fold this into the 2024 budget consideration when we do that process toward the end of the year, so that it can be viewed in the context of the complete budget, and we don't start spending money. You know, last year we spent roughly $1 million in budget modifications. That adds up. So let's put it in the right context so that citizens see the complete budget and not piecemeal it as we go. Thank you.
To be clear, this goes through HR, and then it was going towards finance for the 2024 budget. So this wasn't going to be a budget mod. It wasn't going to be, of what I understood, it wasn't going to be in 2023. But, okay, any other further comment? Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and I think that Alder Denny kind of leads into what I was going to mention too, because looking at the timeline of this, even if we take action on this today, it's still got to go to finance, and we got to figure out where the money's going to come from. And I don't think there's a whole lot of appetite for mid-year budget modifications for a position like this. I'd rather, and I don't want to get into the nuances of the financing this, because that's for another committee. But I think we need to figure out, where we're going to sit with the levy before we create this new position. But do we, as the HR committee, do we need to create this position in order to have that discussion for the budget? And if we create this position, and finance deems that we can't fit it into the 24 budget, then what happens to the position? Does it just lay fallow?
I guess maybe I'll take a stab at this, but the process is yours, right? You're the council. You get to decide. The reason I'm bringing this forward now, last November, we had kind of a last-minute amendment to the budget about a position, and everyone was kind of surprised, and where does this come from? And I didn't want to be a part of something like that for you all to decide on. If there are other positions you want to consider, and it sounds like some people in the public would like that, do it. But this is the one that I noticed a gap on, and where I feel that we could use more support. So if it's not funded in the budget, obviously we can't move forward with it. It has to be funded. But I think this is just the beginning point of the conversation.
So we really would. So if we want to further the discussion of this, we would either need to table it for a future meeting, or refer it back for, just kind of massaging of the job description, and then make that position so that it can be discussed as a budgetary item, because I don't think we can discuss a budgetary item unless we have an item to discuss budgetarily.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, the process would be, HR determines, since I've been chair and since I've been on this for 7 years, it was HR determines the need, they send it to finance, they determine if it is something that can be funded. It can go down in either committee. So that is the process. But when finance gets it from HR, and it's like, it is passed by HR, I've heard the HR chair say, this is a recommendation of the HR committee, that this is the position, that it is a need of the city. So that's kind of how the thought process. You're right, Michael, we can send it back to staff and say, we want to look at something more web-based. We want to look at something different or whatever, and then have it bring it back. We can table for a future date. We can put it up for vote now and see, have an up or down vote. It's up to the committee.
Do you mind if I weigh
Go
in
ahead.
one more time? I have not talked to the chair of finance about this. In fact, I haven't really talked to the chair of HR about this either. But I think, there are those opportunities in those budget workshops that happen in September, October timeframe where they can talk about a variety of things. If that was something that, you were like, well, maybe if we could figure it out, that's fine. I think there's opportunity to go a couple different ways with this.
I do see the value of this position, and I think this is something that the city does need to look at very seriously. When we talk about being aspirational, and I think that's important, that, I hear a lot of times, people will say in a sort of denigrating tone that, well, Wausau's not a Little Madison, or Wausau aspires to be a Little Madison, or Wausau aspires to be a little version of XYZ city. And I think, we can always look at what other communities are doing, even if they're larger than us or smaller than us, and see the value of how they're working how the municipality is working for their community and for their citizens. And if a communications officer is part of that mix, I think that's something that we need to explore. I don't, I think I got a feeling today if we take a vote on this, I think it's going to die, and I don't want to see that happen. I think we need to really talk. I think we need to talk this through a little bit more. I don't think this is something that's going to happen this year. But if we want something that, if this is something that we can kind of flesh out and build on, it's certainly worth consideration for the 24 budget. And then we can let finance figure out, how are we going to make that fit into the budget, if we can even make that fit into the budget. But I think we need to continue this discussion in some way, shape, or form.
Good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say I would like to vote on this today. It was brought to us, and I think for optics' sake, if we start saying, we're not going to vote on things because they're going to be defeated or die, so let's only vote on things we know we have the votes baked in at the time to pass, I think you'll really need a communications specialist then, because I don't know what the press release, how that narrative would go. I think it came to us for action, and let's take action, and we can put our markers down on the table on where we all stand as members of this committee, and if it dies and someday the city wants to resurrect it, then so be it. But I think we deliberated at length today, and this has been a matter of public interest, and I think we deserve it for committee business and for our public to take action on it today. Thank you.
Well, did you make a motion?
I will make a motion.
Make a motion we do it on the affirmative,
Affirmatively,
so to
yes.
accept the position as written. Do we have a second?
I'll second it for the process.
Process, okay. Question, does anybody want to amend the position, or just take the vote as it is now?
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I think I think this issue has certainly been in the community, and I think that, I think if there's other suggestions for with regard to web-based or other positions within the city, I think that may come at another time, specifically within the 2024 budget. But I think that this issue has garnered enough community support, garnered enough community interest that I think that the community is looking to see where we're going with this. I will be voting against this. I don't feel that this is the right thing at this point in time. I think the community, as expressed this evening, has concerns about budgets, about how we are spending our money, and our priorities. And it's not the issue of this HR committee, but we have other priorities that are facing our community today and tomorrow, and it's the job of the city to start to take a look at some of those, because they're not they're garnering discussion that I don't think is favorable for the city. And I think that we have to take a look at that. But for now, I don't see a need at this point in time, in the light of budgets, in the light of community response, that I could support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am concerned that if we vote this down tonight, that is that going to be a dead deal? Or can we talk about it again? If I amend it, will that take us to perhaps a couple of meetings, have more discussion on this?
If we, I think it always can be brought back, can it, Ann?
Yes, if you want to lay it on the table, you can pick it back up. You can lay a motion on the table, and then pick it back up at a particular meeting, or you can postpone it indefinitely, or move to postpone it to a particular meeting. Or
If it was
refer it to a
voted-
particular
right.
committee.
If it was voted down, it could be brought back in a different manner.
Yes, because it's only at the committee
Right,
level, not at
committee
the council level.
So those are your three choices. You could vote it down and then, but you could at the same time, task staff to look at the web-based portion or to, a different, to bring back at a later date closer to the 24 budget. Or you can, you could just, amend that you want to lay it on the table for a certain date forward to talk about it some more. Up to you. But right now, we do have a motion and a second for a vote to accept the position.
I'm thinking about the council rules now, though, as I say that, because they were written originally for the intention of the use of the council with, the reconsideration and
Right.
so forth in there, but now we've made most of the rules applicable to the standing committees.
Well, if they bring it back in a different form, though.
Yeah, it might, if those rules apply, it might have to wait 30 days.
Yeah. Well, we'd have to anyway, because that's our meeting time, so.
True.
Yeah. I think.
Madam Chair, my thoughts on this, and this didn't come up, water increase came up, but also July 1st, we're going to have a sewer increase.
Yeah.
And it's tough right now. And I'm not sure at this point that we are ready to move forward on the communications officer. I'm in favor of it, but at this point, I would have to say I cannot support it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other amendments? Otherwise, we'll go forward with the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. That fails 1-4. We can still talk. Would you like to direct staff to come back with that? I know that there was some, interest in a web-based, kind of position or quasi-position to work on the website? Go ahead, Michael.
I know that we've had discussion, it's brought to our attention, and we've had discussion about the new website, and that is going to take resources in order to maintain it effectively. I think we've recently tasked the administrative assistant in the fire department for a lot of those website tasks, and I don't know. I know sometimes things end up in a person's lap because they might have a specific ability in order to do those things. But I think we may need to see with the ongoing needs of the fire department, maybe that's something that we can develop into, if not a full-time position, something part-time, in order to alleviate some of the stress that's going to be happening in that department, but also meet the needs of what is going to be required when the new site goes online.
Okay. With that, that was our last item. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Herb, second by Killian. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, we're adjourned.